Hello, welcome to the 8th edition of our history of Leicester City as told through its memorabilia and through its archives. This week we're looking at the 1960s, which was a glorious decade for Leicester City. They spent the whole of the decade, apart from the last 6 months, in the top flight. They reached 3 FA Cup finals. They reached 2 League Cup finals, winning the League Cup once. They were realistic contenders. The famous Ice Kings team were realistic contenders to win the League and Cup double in 1963. They played in Europe, and they also had some great players, one of whom of course was the World Cup winning goalkeeper Gordon Banks. In 1961 Leicester City met Tottenham Hotspur in the FA Cup final. Tottenham Hotspur were league champions. It had been a long and difficult route for Leicester to reach Wembley. They'd had replays against Birmingham City and Barnsley. They were tough games. And then they met Sheffield United in the semi-final, and that really was an epic because the tie was only settled after a second replay. The team knew they were going to face Sheffield United when they heard the draw, and this photograph shows them gathered around a radio Monday lunchtime, hearing that Sheffield United were going to be their opponents. In the game itself, the first game, as this ticket shows, was at Elland Road, and that was a 0-0 draw. The second game was at the City Ground in Nottingham Forest's ground, and that was also a 0-0 draw after extra time. And the tie wasn't settled until the third game, when Leicester City won 2-0 with goals from captain Jimmy Walsh and Wales international Ken Leake. Over 130,000 people watched this tie, an aggregate figure over the 3 games. Their opponents at Wembley, as I mentioned, were Tottenham Hotspur. The club produced this souvenir booklet which contains pen portraits of the players, and in the lead up to the final, in the week before the final, because cup finals were big national events in those days, much bigger than today, the Radio Times published a picture of Danny Blanchflower, the Spurs captain, and Jimmy Walsh, the Leicester City captain, on the cover. This particular Radio Times is on display in the reception area of King Power Stadium. On the eve of the cup final, there was an absolute sensation. Leicester City's manager, Matt Gillies, dropped the club's leading scorer, who had scored in every round leading up to the final, the Wales international Ken Leake. The official reason, as can be seen from this newspaper article, was that he was to be replaced by a young reserve centre-forward called Hugh McIlmoyle, who was, according to Gillies, the man in form. Fans didn't really believe this explanation. McIlmoyle can be seen in this picture as the team lined up for the introduction to the Duchess of Kent at Wembley. He is the third player in from the right with the ball at his feet. In the club's collection we have the programme for the game. It's a 24-page programme with all of the usual items in it: pen pictures, photographs, results leading up to Wembley, that sort of thing. And we also have one of the community song sheets. One of the big features of Wembley back in those days was the Daily Express community singing, and fans were issued with a song sheet with the words on for 14 or 15 songs, the most famous of which of course was the traditional Abide With Me. As for the game itself, Leicester City, who were a good side, they were 6th that season, lost 2-0, but the story of the game really was that within the 20th minute, after about 20 minutes, their right back Len Chalmers was badly injured, and there were no substitutes in those days, so effectively Leicester played for the rest of the game with 10 men. They held out against league champions Tottenham until 20 minutes from the end, when Bobby Smith, the Spurs England centre-forward, scored, and they added a second, and you can see Gordon Banks conceding this second goal when Spurs' Terry Dyson scored. We have a lot of memorabilia from this cup final. The medals and kit of Howard Riley, along with Richie Norman, the left back, his memorabilia too, are on display in the reception area at King Power Stadium. Here we have Howard Riley's runners-up medal. We have a lot of fan memorabilia too, including this rattle which has been customised by the owner, who has painted the names of the team on the blue and white rattle. After the game, the team had a banquet at the Dorchester Hotel in London, a posh affair, 300 guests were present. 11 days after the FA Cup final, Leicester City went on a tour to South Africa and Rhodesia. Rhodesia now, of course, is Zimbabwe. They played 5 games, they won 4 and they drew 1 of them. The programme for one of those games against Durban City can be seen here, and we also have in the club's archives this newspaper report from the Natal Mercury, which announced the arrival of Leicester City for this game against Durban City, which Leicester actually won 2-0. Because Tottenham Hotspur were league champions when they won the FA Cup final, which meant of course they were League and Cup double winners, this meant their place in the European Cup Winners' Cup went to Leicester City, as Tottenham Hotspur were obviously involved in the European Cup as league champions. Leicester City's first competitive game in Europe then was against the Northern Irish side Glenavon, and we have here a postcard showing the BEA Viscount, which took the team to Windsor Park for this game against Glenavon. It was a 2-legged tie. Leicester won the tie 7-2 on aggregate. The next game in Europe was against the Spanish giants Atletico Madrid, who were actually winners of the European Cup Winners' Cup that season. The first game was at Filbert Street, which Leicester drew 1-1. Controversially, they had a goal disallowed. The players today, talking about that game, still think they should have won it. The second leg was in Madrid. Before the game, the team were given the opportunity to watch a bull fight training, and Richie Norman, as you can see in this picture, actually had a little go at participating. Richie's the chap in the white raincoat. Leicester lost the game 2-0. Howard Riley has this poster, which is on display at the stadium, advertising the game, and after the game the teams went for a presentation dinner, and here you can see Richie Norman receiving a statuette. You can just see the statuette with the raised hand and the spear, and this was a statuette of the Spanish literary character Don Quixote. This is the statuette in its full glory, which is at the stadium. Other mementos presented to the club as a result of this tie was this bottle of Pedro de Mec sherry, which still has some sherry in the bottom of it all these years later. It was signed by all of the Atletico Madrid players, and we also have this silver tray which commemorated the tie too. The 1962-63 season was one of the best seasons in Leicester City's history. The team pictured here were realistic contenders for the League and FA Cup double. On the back row from left to right we have Keyworth, Schoberg, King, Banks, Appleton, the captain, Norman and Stringfellow, and on the front row we have from left to right Riley, McClintock, Gibson and Cross. It was a very harsh winter that winter, the harshest of the century, and the team was known as the Ice Kings. Filbert Street pitch was kept more playable than a lot of pitches because the groundsman had this chemical formula which did actually make the pitch playable, although it ruined the pitch for many years to come. On Boxing Day 1962, Leicester City started a 10-match winning sequence, 7 in the top flight, 3 in the FA Cup, which not only took them to second place in the old First Division, it also meant that they got to the FA Cup semi-final where they played Bill Shankly's Liverpool. Mike Stringfellow's goal, pictured here, was the goal which defeated Liverpool, giving Leicester City a place in the FA Cup final against relegation fighting Manchester United, so Leicester City were red-hot favourites to win this final. The programme for the final can be seen here. They put a picture of Wembley on the front because it was the first cup final when the Wembley roof enclosed the whole ground rather than having the two ends uncovered. The ticket for the game We've got many of these in the club's collection, but this particular ticket indicates that because of the harsh winter, the original date of the cup final, May the 4th, had been postponed till May the 25th because there have been so many postponements as a result of the bad winter. Here we have a picture of 3 fans making their way down to London to join the 100,000 crowd which watched the game. There were many sort of souvenirs which fans bought and kept, and we have several of these in the club's collection, such as this plastic rosette with pictures of all of the players' face on. There's this plastic wallet, again with pictures of the players and bits of information on. All of these were sort of fan souvenirs. As far as the final itself was concerned, it was a huge disappointment. Leicester City, despite being red-hot favourites, lost 3-1 to Manchester United. They played in white shirts, as you can see from this action shot here, because the match was on black and white television, and Leicester's blue and Manchester United's red would have been indistinguishable on a television screen. We have Howard Riley's cup final shirt here. This is on display in the stadium. In the end, the season was a disappointment. With 5 games to go, they were top of the table and cup finalists. But as we've noticed, we lost the cup final and they had a bad run in that last 5 games, and in the end finished 4th, which was highly creditable, although that wasn't a Champions League place in those days, but nevertheless was disappointing, bearing in mind that right towards the end of the season they were still in with a shout for a league and cup double. Davy Gibson's great form throughout the 1962-63 season saw him rewarded at the end of that season with his first Scotland cap. His Scotland shirt is on display at the King Power Stadium in the Legends Lounge, along with his cap and other memorabilia. A month later, his Leicester teammate Frank McClintock was also rewarded with his first cap for Scotland. The 1963-64 season didn't reach the heights of the 62-63 season, despite the club spending £41,000, a club record fee, on Motherwell's Bobby Roberts, who was a big player for the club over the next few years. They did, however, reach the final of the League Cup, then in its 4th season. In those days the finals weren't at Wembley, there were 2-legged affairs, home and away, and Leicester's final opponents were Stoke City. They drew 1-1 in the away leg, with Davy Gibson scoring, and then in the home leg they won 3-2 with Gibson, Stringfellow and Riley scoring the goals. Here we see the programme for the second leg when the League Cup was secured against Stoke City, and after the game Colin Appleton was awarded, as you can see here, or presented with the League Cup. The players didn't get medals, they won a tankard each, and Graham Cross's tankard, seen here, is on display in reception. This pennant commemorates the achievement, and it did mean that Leicester City had won its first piece of national silverware in its history. The close season of 1964 saw the club produce this official handbook with the League Cup proudly displayed on the front cover. Frank McClintock, a big star, was sold to Arsenal for £80,000. The season also saw the club reach another League Cup final, this time against Chelsea. Again a 2-legged affair. They lost 2-3 in the first leg, conceding a late goal when they were shouldn't have done really, and they drew 0-0 at Filbert Street, which meant that Chelsea in fact were the League Cup winners for that season. The 1965-66 season started with a home game against Liverpool, and it was significant because it was the first time in Leicester's history that they'd ever used a substitute. It was the first season that substitutes were allowed, and the man who was Leicester City's first substitute was their inside forward, Jimmy Goodfellow. During the close season preceding the 65-66 season, Matt Gillett had made 2 big signings for Leicester City, each for £25,000. The first was the Maverick centre forward, the ex-Portsmouth, Blackburn and Villa and Peterborough centre forward Derek Dugan, Northern Ireland international, He was signed from Peterborough. And the second one was Jackie Sinclair, a very skillful, pacey, goal-scoring right winger from Dunfermline. These two made a big impact on Leicester City over the next couple of seasons. There's an action shot of them here, playing against West Ham, and the two of them scored a lot of goals. In that first season, Jackie Sinclair from the wing scored 24 goals and Derek Dugan scored 20. At the end of the season, when Leicester finished 7th, Gordon Banks, as part of the preparation for the World Cup that summer, was called up to play for England in a midweek match, and in his place towards the end of the season for the home game against Everton, which Leicester won 3-0, Leicester City gave a debut to 16-year-old Peter Shilton, who of course was to become a great name in the game in subsequent years. The following year, 1966-67, Leicester City finished 8th, but there was a big shock in March of that year when Derek Dugan left to play for Wolves, and a month later Gordon Banks left Filbert Street to go to Stoke City. For the 1967-68 season, as this team photograph shows, the club for the first time in its history wore an all-blue strip. In November, Matt Gillies signed an old-fashioned journeyman centre-forward called Frank Large from Northampton Town. He was the sort of player who had run through brick walls and the fans loved him. And shortly afterwards, Matt Gillies then spent a record fee for a winger, an English record fee for a winger, when he spent £80,000 on Charlton Athletics' Len Glover. In January, Matt Gillies took 3 months off for stress, and the team was taken over by his assistant Bert Johnson. At the end of the season, the club went on a tour to Zambia. Bert Johnson was in charge. It was not just a Leicester City tour, it was a Leicester City tour with an FA party. The aim was to sort of develop the game in Zambia. As a result of this tour, on their return, a few weeks after their return, the club received a letter from no less than the president of Zambia, President Kenneth Kaunda, which is in the club's archive. It can be seen here addressed. It was addressed to the club's chairman, Alf Pallett. Also during that close season of 1968, Leicester City broke a British transfer record by signing Alan Clark, a forward from Fulham, for £150,000. Much to his disappointment, Frank Large, who was a cult figure at Filbert Street, was part of the deal, and he went to Fulham. The 1968-69 season was very much a season of highs and lows. In October, Matt Gillies signed the Burnley centre-forward Andy Lockhead, but a month later, in November, he had resigned in protest about the sacking of his coach Bert Johnson. Leicester were struggling at the bottom of the First Division. The new manager was Frank O'Farrell, the Torquay manager. He had been a West Ham, Preston, North End and Ireland international footballer and came with a good reputation. Although the team struggled in the league for the rest of the season, O'Farrell did oversee a momentous FA Cup run which took Leicester City all the way to Wembley for the third time for an FA Cup final that decade. Highlights of that run included a famous win over Liverpool at Anfield and a defeat of West Brom with a late goal in the semi-final at Hillsborough. This meant that they had an FA Cup final against the previous season's league champions, Manchester City. Once again, the fans made the journey down to London to join the 100,000 crowd, wearing rosettes like the one we've got featured here. The FA Cup final programme can be seen here. It highlighted the stars of both sides. Manchester City's star players included the likes of Mike Summerby, Colin Bell and Francis Lee. At kick-off, Leicester City's captain, David Nish, can be seen here on the right. He was the youngest ever, and still is, the youngest ever FA Cup final captain. He was only 21. The match ball can be seen here, and the match was actually won by Manchester City 1-0, with a goal being scored, or with the goal being scored, by Neil Young in the 23rd minute. The man of the match was Leicester City's Alan Clark, who had been the British transfer record signing at the beginning of the season, although he was soon to leave for Leeds United at the end of the season. After the FA Cup final, Leicester City had a really difficult 3 weeks. They had 5 games to play, and they had to do well in these games to avoid relegation. In the end, it came down to having to win at Old Trafford in the last game of the season. The squad for the game you can see in this picture here, and action from the game you can see here, but unfortunately Leicester City lost the game 3-2 and found themselves relegated after a 12-year stay in the top flight. Next time we'll look at the 1970s. In this decade, Franco Farrell got Leicester City back into the top flight. Bloomfield created an extremely entertaining side with star players, with star quality. How that side declined, and how Jock Wallace built a new, vibrant, young side which took Leicester into the next decade back in the top flight. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.